So tomorrow, we're going to read PARSHAT PEKUDEI. And that's going to be the last parasha of Chumash Shmot. It's also going to be a special Shabbat because it's going to be Shabbat Mevarchim. We're going to bless the month of Nisan, which Nisan, of course, is the month of our redemption. And we get ready to eat matzah and to celebrate freedom. And Bezrat Hashem this year, we're not only going to celebrate freedom remembering Exodus, but we're going to celebrate freedom with the actual feeling of freedom within Yerushalayim in Bet HaMikdash HaShlishi. So it's Parashat PEKUDEI. Parashat PEKUDEI actually finishes a series of 4 Torah reading, 4 Parshiyot, which the central theme of these 4 Parshiyot are the building of the tabernacle, the building of the Mishkan. But very surprisingly, the Torah, who is very, very, very conserving of words, when it comes to the Mishkan, the Torah says the whole story, not once, but twice. First, how Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu and give them all the instruction on how to build the Mishkan. And then, in the middle, we have the story in Parashat Ki Tisa of the golden calf, where the Jews sin. And then how Moshe Rabbeinu is instructing all the Jews. We started having it in the end of Parashat Ki Tisa and in the beginning of Parashat Vayakel, and again now in Parashat PEKUDEI, where the Jews are, Moshe Rabbeinu is commanding and instructing and commanding all the Jews on how to prepare everything for the Mishkan, and how the Jews are actually do it. And this is very, very, very rare case in the Torah. The Torah that only spend about 30-some verses on the 7th day of the creation of the universe. Okay? The beginning of Parashat Bereshit, where the Torah described the creation of the universe, the Torah spent, if I'm not mistaken, 30-some verses. And here, on the tabernacle, the Torah goes on and on and on and repeats itself and repeats itself. And to our surprise, Rashi, who's the most known and important commentator on the Torah, doesn't say anything, doesn't explain it. A question that many deal with, Rashi is refused to comment on it and to explain it. So that's going to be the theme of the class today. And of course, we're going to end up with a very interesting observation. And Bezrat Hashem also, it's going to give us the practical instruction into our life and into the way we learn Torah and the stories in the Torah and the way that we teach others, especially our children and those who depend on us and those whom we have influence on, and to teach them in a special way. So let me share the screen, and if Dr. Chen has enough power, we'll give him the zchut, the merit to start with the class. Okay, so some things worth repeating. Let's see. So this is, for example, you're gonna see here few quotes, one from those different 4 Torah portions, where you're going to see that it's almost 1-to-1 copy paste of each other. And the question will arise, if it's just about a copy paste of each other, why does the Torah repeats it with all the details instead of just saying they did whatever they were commanded? Let's see, Khenji, a few examples from the verses in the Torah which shows us how the Torah almost repeating itself word to word. Khenji, bevakasha. And this is from this week Torah portion.
You shall make the planks for the Mishkan of acacia wood upright. 10 cubits shall be the length of each plank, and 1.5 cubits shall be the width of each plank. Each plank shall have 2 square pegs, rung like one even with the other. So shall you make all the planks of the Mishkan. Make the planks for the Mishkan 20 planks for the southern side.
So this is from 2 weeks ago or last week. And now if you look at the right side, you're going to see this is from this week to our portion. You're going to see that it's almost word to word of what we have read last week. And the question is, the Torah, you know how many verses the Torah spent on explaining us the importance of the mitzvah of putting on tefillin every day and how you actually do the tefillin. Who knows how many verses the Torah spent on explaining us how to make the tefillin? Anybody know? The Torah only says one thing. וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך. You should bind them as a sign on your hand, and they should be as a sign between your eyes. Bam. That's it. The Torah doesn't say what color, what size, what is the material it needs to be made from. Nothing. The same in regards to slaughtering. Okay? When it comes to slaughtering, and we know the whole laws of kashrut, which are extensive, and they have so much influence on my day-to-day life and on your day-to-day life, right? How to prepare kosher food, what is kosher, but the whole details only says in the Torah, וזבחת כאשר ציוויתיך. You should slaughter the way I have commanded you. And the Torah doesn't add a word. All the details which we know how we live our life, all those details come from the oral Torah. Nothing, almost nothing, it's in the written Torah. So the question is, if things that are so important in our day-to-day life, the Torah barely says anything. The Torah relies on what is going to be said in the oral Torah. So we will know all the details from the oral Torah. Why here in the story of the Mishkan, the Torah repeats itself so many times and with such extensive length? So let's see another example of it. Khenji, please.
Make 40 silver sockets under the 20 planks, 2 sockets under one plank for its 2 square pegs, and 2 sockets under one plank for its 2 square pegs.
And you see on the right and on the left, you're going to see that it's exactly the same words, word to word, copy paste from one portion of the Torah to another portion of the Torah. Yeah. There is no chidush, there's nothing new, there's no new information, no new instruction. Just here, it's when Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu, and this is how Moshe Rabbeinu commands the Jews, and this is how the Jews actually execute it. Let's see how the Rebbe asked the question. The question the Rebbe is going to ask is mostly not on the Torah itself, but why Rashi does not command anything. Let's see it inside.
And they did it would have been enough. We have explained many times that Rashi, in his commentary on the Torah, focuses on clarifying any aspect of the plain meaning of the text that requires explanation. When Rashi has no way to explain something, he writes, I don't know, or something similar. If there's a difficulty in understanding the simple meaning and Rashi does not address it, one of two things must be true. Either the difficulty does not exist according to the plain meaning, or it is already explained by an earlier comment of Rashi.
And now the Rebbe is going to say that if Rashi doesn't mention something, okay, like the Rebbe explained now, it's either of the two. Either it's not a question, or it's a question that already been answered by Rashi itself. So now what's the question?
In the current weekly portions of the Torah, there is an apparent difficulty in the plain meaning of the text that Rashi does not address. In the portion of Vayakhel, the Torah describes how Moshe
Vayakhel, it's God. Last week. Vayakhel, it's what we have read last week, yes?
The Torah describes how Moshe conveyed God's command regarding the donations for the Mishkan, tabernacle, to the Jewish people, including all the details, the commandment to bring the gold, silver, and other materials needed, and then the commandments regarding the construction of the Mishkan and his vessels, also in full detail.
Okay, then following this,
the Torah describes how the people actually brought their donations and then relates in detail how the skilled craftsmen carried out the work constructing the Mishkan, its covering, and its vessels. Later, in the portion of PEKUDEI, the assembly of the priestly
portion of
garments,
PEKUDEI, it's this week Torah portion. Yes.
the assembly of the priestly garments is also detailed. Seemingly, the text could have been much more concise. It could have simply stated that Moshe relayed all of God's instruction regarding the donations and construction of the Mishkan, the details of which are given in the portion of Teruma, Tetzaveh, and Kitesa. And that said something like, and the Israelites did everything as God commanded Moshe.
Yeah. There is
And
another
a shorter option
yes,
would be stating, and the Israelites did everything as God commanded Moshe immediately after the account of God's command to Moshe. We find that the Torah summarizes events like this in a number of places, including in the current portions. So why does the Torah restate all the details, both in recounting how Moshe conveyed the commands to the people, and then again in the verses describing how they carried them out?
So that's part one of the question. Part one of the question is why the Torah itself is adding so many words and repeating itself so many times in this story as opposed to other occasions and other stories. Now, the second portion of the question, which is why Rashi doesn't comment on it, why Rashi doesn't explain this question. Let's see it.
This question becomes even stronger based on what Rashi writes at the beginning of Vayakil. I have already explained the donations for the Mishkan and its construction, where they were originally commanded. From this, it is clear that these portions do not introduce any new information beyond what was already stated in the earlier portions. This is why Rashi has nothing to add in his commentary here. This strengthens the question, does the Torah repeat twice the full details of these matters?
Yeah. And as we're going to see now, and the Rabbi already mentioned, Rashi doesn't repeat itself when he already explains something. And here, when the Torah repeats itself the second time, Rashi says, you know what? I won't add anything because I've already explained it in the previous parasha. So if Rashi and himself saying, I will not add because I've already explained it, why doesn't he explain why the Torah itself repeats itself? Let's see source number 2.
Take from yourself an offering for God. Every generous-hearted person shall bring it. God's offering, gold, silver, and copper. Rashi, generous-hearted. Since his heart moved him to generosity, he is called generous-hearted. I already explained the offering for the Mishkan and its work in the place of their command.
And therefore, because I've already explained it in the place of their command, now in the place of the execution, I won't repeat it. And this is Rashi, who is only the commentator. But at the Torah itself, Rashi doesn't seem to be bothered by the fact that the Torah repeats the whole story again, and Rashi does not explain why. So let's see how the Rebbe lays the question.
Why is Rashi silent? This question is a straightforward issue in the plain meaning of the text, and several Torah commentators address it. Yet we find no explanation for it in Rashi, not at the beginning of Vayakil, not at the conclusions of the matter in PEKUDEI.
Yeah. In PARSHAT PEKUDEI, Rashi doesn't say anything, not in Vayakil, not in PEKUDEI. And as we're going to see now, other commentators, we're going to have, for example, an example from the Abarbanel, who explain in length that this whole thing, it's of no use because the Torah have already mentioned all the details, and now in the repetition of the story, in the repetition of the instruction, there's no new information. Let's see source number 3 from the Abarbanel itself.
In mentioning here They brought the Mishkan to Moshe, the tent and all its furnishing, and then listing once again all the vessels and items that had already been mentioned numerous times in the preceding portions. The text appears to be an evident repetition and redundancy. It will have sufficed to state simply, and they brought to Moshe all the work of the Mishkan, and Moshe saw all the work, and behold, they did it as God had commanded. So they did, and Moshe blessed them. What then is the necessity of repeating all these details again, describing the items that had already been mentioned multiple times in the previous sections?
Yeah. So now one might come and say, you know what, this is the Abarbanel who is bothered with this question, but Rashi doesn't hold from it. Rashi doesn't care when the Torah repeats itself a couple of times. This is why Rashi doesn't care over here. It doesn't explain it. And now the Rebbe is going to quote another place where Rashi, in a different text, in a different scenario, the Torah repeats itself 3 times, same words in 3 different locations. And Rashi explains why the Torah repeats itself 3 times. One is for this. Let's see it inside. And then we'll explain. Yeah.
Rashi usually explains repetition. This is especially striking because earlier in the portion of Ki Tisa, Rashi explains why the Torah repeats just a few specific words in the verse. Do not cook a kid in its mother's milk, explaining that it appears 3 times in the Torah in order to teach distinct laws. Yet here, entire portions of the Torah are repeated in great detail, and Rashi doesn't offer any explanation.
So the verse, the Torah says in different places, 3 times the Torah says the verse, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Okay? Now the Torah says this in different places 3 times, and Rashi is bothered. Why does the Torah bring it 3 times? And he explains it. Now this is, soon we're going to see Rashi's explanation. This is just few words where the Torah repeats itself. And Rashi takes time to explain it. Here, the Torah repeats himself at the whole story, and Rashi keeps silence. Let's see Rashi's explanation on why the Torah says 3 times, you should not cook a kid in its mother's milk.
The choicest of the first of your soil you shall bring to the house of God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Rashi, kid. This is a warning against cooking meat and milk together. This commandment is written in the Torah 3 times, 1 for eating, 1 for deriving benefit, and 1 for the prohibition of cooking.
So Rashi explained why 3 times? Because each one has a different prohibition. Each one is a different commandment. One is you're not allowed to eat meat and milk together. The other one, that you're not allowed to cook them together, even if you're not planning to eat them, okay? If you are a chef in a restaurant where it's a non-kosher restaurant, so you don't eat there, but you need, somebody ask you to make a steak, and for the steak you need to put butter, you're not allowed to do it, even if you're not planning to eat it. And the third one is you're not even allowed to enjoy it, meaning you're not allowed even to be the owner of this restaurant who serves meat and milk together, even if you don't cook it and you don't eat it. So the Torah says 3 times, and we learn there are instructions that we learn. Rashi learns from the fact that the Torah repeats the same words 3 times. Rashi not only bothers with it, but he extracts some new information out of it. And here the Torah, tens of verses, not just 1, tens of verses where the Torah repeats itself almost word to word, and Rashi keeps silence. Good question, huh?
Yeah.
Anybody has an answer? Maybe Angela, you should have an answer.
No, I don't have an answer, believe it or not.
Okay. Okay, so we'll wait. I did not have an answer too when I saw it. Let's see the Rebbe's answer. Okay, are you ready? So in order to understand that, we need to understand what is the role of the tabernacle, what is the role of the Mishkan, and what is the role of later Beit HaMikdash in our life and in an historical content, when it came and why it came. Let's see it inside. Precious things get repeated. Kenji, please.
The explanation for this is straightforward. The Mishkan and his vessels were among the most central and cherished elements of Jewish life, as they were the means through which God's presence dwelled among the people. Furthermore, as Rashi explains in this portion, the Mishkan is called the Mishkan of Testimony because it served as a testimony to the Jewish people that God had forgiven them for the sin of the golden calf. Proof of this being that it caused his presence to dwell among them.
Okay, so the Jews receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai. When the Jews receiving the Torah on Mount Sinai, they have, for the first and the only time in the history of this universe, God reveals himself. God speaks to them face to face. Now the Jews then, soon we're going to see that the Jews then got the presence of the Shekhinah, the presence of God that remained with them. But then, couple of weeks later, 40 days later, the Jews are messing up. They're messing up with the golden calf. And the golden calf, Hashem is so angry at the Jews in the case of the golden calf that he wants to destroy all the Jews together. He wants to annihilate them, to wipe them out from earth, and to restart a new nation for Moshe Rabbeinu. Now the Mishkan, so Moshe Rabbeinu fights back, and Hashem forgive the Jews. Soon we're going to see, not entirely, not completely, but he forgive the Jews and is not going to destroy them. The Mishkan, the tabernacle, is a place where Hashem will dwell again among the Jewish people. And that's a sign that Hashem is fully forgiving the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. Let's continue.
This makes it even clearer just how significant and beloved the Mishkan was. The sin of the golden calf was the gravest and most consequential sin, causing the greatest divine concealment and even bringing about a decree of destruction among the Jewish people. So much so that even after being granted forgiveness, God still said, "On the day I make an accounting, I'll account for this sin." From this, we can also understand the flip side. If the sin of the golden calf represented the ultimate rupture in the relationship between God and the Jewish people, then the Mishkan, which restored God's presence among them, was an extraordinarily lofty and fundamental matter.
And now we're going to see where Hashem says that whenever I will make an accounting, meaning whatever I will, for whatever reason, I will have to punish the Jewish people from then on until our days, every punishment that the Jews have is carrying a little bit of a punishment of the sin of the golden calf. Let's see it inside.
I have listened to you, not to destroy them all at once, but every time I take an accounting of their sins, I will also account a little of this sin with the other sins. This means that no punishment befalls Israel in which doesn't include a measure of punishment for the sin of the golden calf.
So the sin of the golden calf, it's such a sin that it's still with us until today. Until 2025, we are still paying the price for the sin of the golden calf. Now we're going to see that what kind of revelation they had on Mount Sinai. And on Mount Sinai, it wasn't temporary. It was meant to continue. This revelation of God was meant to continue with the Jewish people for the rest of their life. But the sin of the golden calf came and we lost it. Let's see it inside. It's from the Talmud, from Tractate Chabad.
Rabbi Simai taught, when the Jews first said, "We will do," and then said, "We will hear," 600,000 angels came to place 2 crowns on their heads, one for do and one for hear. When they later sinned with the golden calf, 120,000 angels descended and removed those crowns. Rashi, 2 crowns from the rays of the divine presence.
So from the rays, each one of us had 2 crowns from the rains of the divine presence on us, each one of us, each Jew on Mount Sinai, and that was supposed to continue to be with us for the rest of our, for eternity. But because of the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf, that was removed from us. So you can imagine, you can understand the flip-flop that the Jews are going through. They are coming from the highest of the highest, the revelation of God himself that stays, this ray of divine presence stays with them, and 40 days later, they are losing it. Not just losing this, they come to a stage of an existential threat. God wants to wipe them out. And even after Moshe Rabbeinu is able to convince Hashem not to destroy the Jewish people, so even then God says, you know what, I won't destroy them all at once, but from now on, they're going to pay the price for the rest of their life. Every time I have to take a punishment, I have to punishment for something, I will give them an extra punishment from the sin of the golden calf. Okay, so we understand the extreme move from one side, the highest revelation of godliness and the closeness the Jews had to God, to the other side where we're losing all of it. But then comes the Mishkan. After Moshe Rabbeinu asked for forgiveness and he goes up again to Hashem for 40 days, and he comes back, and then he goes back up for another 40 days to receive the second tablets. He comes on the day of Yom Kippur. And on the day of Yom Kippur, Moshe Rabbeinu comes and he instructed the Jews, after the forgiveness was a complete forgiveness, is instructing the Jewish people to build the tabernacle. What is the purpose of building the tabernacle? Let's see. Source number 7, and how Rashi interprets and explains it.
These are the numbers of the Mishkan of the testimony, which were counted at Moshe's command. This was the work of the Levites under the direction of Itamar, the son of Aaron the Kohen. Rashi, Mishkan of testimony. The Mishkan was testimony for Israel that God forgave them for the incident of the calf, for he caused his presence to rest among them in the Mishkan.
So now you get it. The Mishkan is not just a beautiful building. The Mishkan is not only a place where Jewish people worship. The Mishkan is not only a place where everyone gets for his own, for atoning for his own sins. The Mishkan is a place that is a testimony that Hashem has forgiven us for the golden calf. And it's a place of reunion with Hashem. So we had the heights of receiving the Torah, the low of the golden calf, and the Mishkan is getting us back up. So obviously, to hear this news that we have a way to reconnect with Hashem. We can re-engage and reconnect with Hashem, and it can have the presence of Hashem once again. Was enormous, good news for the Jewish people. Now, the Rebbe will explain, based on this, the Rebbe will explain why does the Torah repeats the details of the Mishkan, the details of the tabernacle twice. That's it.
It follows then that this special significance of the Mishkan, both to God and to the Jewish people, is the reason why the Torah lists all its details and repeats them multiple times. Rashi did not need to explain this point in the current Torah portions because he already addressed a similar case earlier in the portion of Chaye Sarah. There, after the Torah describes Eliezer's journey to bring Rebekah as a wife for Isaac, it repeats the entire story when Eliezer recounts it to Rebekah's family.
Yeah.
Rashi explains that this repetition is due to the importance of the event. Rabbi Akha said, the ordinary conversation of the servants of the patriarchs is more precious to God than the Torah teachings of their descendants. For the Torah repeats the story of Eliezer in full, while many fundamental Torah laws are only hinted at.
Yeah. So Rashi himself is already teaching us this idea and this rule. When there is a story in the Torah, the story in the Torah takes more importance than the actual instructions and commandments of the Torah. And the story was where Eliezer, the servant of Abraham, was sent to find a wife for Isaac, for Yitzchak. He was sent to Ur Kasdim. Ur Kasdim is where Iraq is today, which the family of not Lavan, his father, what's Lavan's father? I lost it. But anyway, Rivka lived there. And Avraham Avinu is commanding his servant Eliezer to go there and to find a wife for his only son, for Isaac. And the Torah says in great length the whole story, how he went and how many camels he had and what he had on his camels. And now he didn't know how we will identify the perfect girl for Isaac. So he prayed to Hashem and he asked Hashem that I want a special sign. And the special sign is that I will come and I will stay in a place where the well is, and they watering all the people, and I will see a girl. I will ask the girl, can you feed me? The girl will say, not only I'm going to feed you with, I'm going to give you water, I'm going to give you camels too. That's the girl that Hashem has chosen for Isaac. And the Torah describes how it's actually happening to him. That's miracle actually happening to him with Rebekah. Now this is fine. Then he gets very excited. He kisses Rebekah and he asks Rebekah to go to meet her family. He's meeting her family, and now he is standing up. They offer him to eat. He says, I won't eat until I'm going to finish my mission, why I was sent here. And he started telling him the whole story of how his master Abraham sent him and what was on the way, and how he prayed to Hashem that Hashem will send him inside. The whole story once again. And again, that's the same question. Why couldn't the Torah say that he told them what has happened to him instead of repeating exactly word to word what he said? So Rashi then says a very interesting rule in the name of Rabbi Akha. The ordinary conversation of the servant of the patriarch is more precious to God than the Torah's teaching of their descendants. And therefore, because it's a story of the servant of the patriarchs, the Torah repeats that story twice. Let's see where Rashi explains it. Yeah.
I came today to the fountain, and I said, God of my master Abraham, if you desire to prosper my way upon which I am going. Rashi, I came today. Today I left, and today I arrived. From here we learn that his journey was miraculously shortened. Rabbi Akha said, the ordinary conversation of the servants of the patriarch is more precious to God than the Torah teachings of their descendants. For the section dealing with Eliezer is repeated in the Torah, whereas many fundamentals of the Torah were given only through allusions.
Yeah. And this, the Rebbe concludes why the Torah repeats the whole story of the tabernacle, the Mishkan, twice, based on the same principle. From this,
we learn that when something is especially cherished by God, the Torah repeats it in full detail, even if nothing new is being added. The same principle applies here to the Mishkan.
Okay, So the same thing, the same way that the Torah repeats the story of the marriage between between Isaac and Rebekah, which was the beginning of all the Jewish nation, right? We are sitting here. This was the first Jewish wedding. And we are sitting here today in 2025, wherever you may be seated, in Mumbai, Tel Aviv, New York, and on. We are sitting here thanks to this event. Therefore, that event was so cherishable by Hashem that Hashem repeats the story, the Torah repeats the story twice. The same is true here with the Mishkan, which is the reunion of Am Israel and God. The Mishkan is the place where the Jews have reunion with Hashem. So the Torah repeats the story of the Mishkan, the tabernacle, the details, how you build it, what do you build, what is the details, how you craft it, what are the ingredients, what are the whole thing. The Torah repeats twice because the excitement of the matter. It's like when you have stories, right? When you have a story that is important for you, and people ask you to say the story, right? When people ask, when couple who have a good marriage, they ask, how did you meet? How did you know each other? So they can say the story hundreds of times, again and again, with full details. They won't miss a bit. He smiled, I smiled, he did, the whole thing. The same thing is with the Torah when it comes to say in the special reunion and the relationship that Hashem has reestablished with us through the tabernacle. The Torah repeats it twice. But the Rebbe does not suffice with this. The Rebbe is going to ask a question. And the question is, let's see, what's the question?
For the descendants too. However, this still requires further clarification. Rashi's comment to Chai Sarah actually seems to suggest the opposite, that the above reasoning would not apply in our case. The statement that the ordinary conversation of the servants of the patriarchs is more precious to God than the Torah teachings of the descendants implies that after the giving of the Torah, we do not find this kind of repetition due to special significance. If so, how can we use this explanation for the repetition in the construction of the Mishkan, which is a part of the Torah given to Jewish people?
Yeah, beautiful question. What we just said, that the stories of the patriarchs is more important than the Torah teaching of the children after the receiving of the Torah. But here, the whole story of the Mishkan, it's after the receiving of the Torah. So if so, how can it be repeated twice based on the same principle, which we said that the story of the patriarch are more important than the Torah teaching of the children? So the Rebbe will explain that in a very simple way.
The conversation is what is cherished. The explanation is as follows. The point of the statement quoted by Rashi is not to highlight the superiority of the servants of the patriarchs over the descendants, but rather to emphasize the unique value and beloved nature that conversation can sometimes have compared to Torah's teaching. The difference between the two is straightforward. Torah consists of commandments, laws, and instructions given by God, what to do and how to do it.
But conversation,
on the other hand, refers to spoken words that on the surface are not legal directives, but rather narratives, description of events, actions, or situations. In the case of Eliezer, for example, his speech was not a divine commandment, but a story about Abraham, Isaac, and how he encountered Rebekah, including miraculous events such as the shortening of his journey and the miraculous nature of his encounter with Rebekah. The statement Rashi brings is meant to highlight the special quality of conversation, that sometimes even the conversation of a servant of the patriarch is more precious than the Torah of their descendants.
Why? Because as we said before, that conversation is about the story who brought upon the Jewish people. That's the beginning of that's the first marriage of a Jewish couple, and that's the foundation of the Jewish people. Therefore, because of what is the topic, the conversation over the topic is so important. And this is more important than the Torah command you to do A or to do B or to do C, which are just commandments. Here there is a story, and the story is so important that the Torah repeats the details of the story, and the Torah repeats the story twice. And the same is true over here.
With this in mind, we can also understand the repetition in these Torah portions. After the portions of Teruma and Tetzaveh, which provide the commandments and instructions regarding the construction of the Mishkan, the later portions do not introduce new directives or laws. Instead, they recount in detail how Moshe relayed God's instruction to the people and how they fulfilled them in practice. In other words, these sections function as conversation, narrative rather than legal instruction. And because this narrative concerns the tabernacle, which is so deeply cherished, the Torah repeats it in full detail.
That's it. Let's see the key point.
In the Torah portions of Vayakhel and PEKUDEI, the Torah repeats God's instruction to Moshe regarding the construction of the Mishkan. In fact, this repetition is almost identical to the original commands. Why the duplication? The explanation: the Mishkan is a central and precious element in the life of the Jewish people. The presence of the divine within it served as a testament to God's forgiveness for the sin of the golden calf, a sin that had caused divine concealment and the withdrawal of his presence. Because the Mishkan is so dear and beloved, both to God and the Jewish people, the Torah repeats its instruction twice, emphasizing its great significance.
Rashi
already explained this concept in PARSHAT Chaye Sarah, where the Torah repeats Eliezer's account of his mission to find a match for Isaac. Rashi states, the conversation of the servants of the patriarch is more beloved than the Torah of their descendants, which is why this event is recorded in the Torah twice. From here, we learn the principle that the Torah repeats matters that are cherished. The Rabbi highlights that this midrash is not limited to the conversations of the patriarch servants, but applies to any biblical narrative, event, or dialogue that is both important and beloved. Therefore, such matters are given repeated mention in the Torah, just like the Mishkan's instructions, which are repeated due to their great significance.
Let's see the takeaway.
We have been gifted a priceless treasure, the stories of the Torah and the teachings of our sages, an endless reservoir of wisdom and awe of heaven. Here, when we share these stories with the children, whether at the Shabbat table or even before bedtime, they leave a deep and lasting impression on their souls in an engaging and meaningful manner, no less impactful than Torah study itself.
That's the point. The point is that instructions, you can give instruction. It's important. The Torah spent great efforts in giving instructions. But through the stories of the Torah, through the story of the history of the Jewish people, through the story of the holy books, through the stories of great righteous people, the kids can get more, not information. Information they should get, they will get from the Torah. But the kids can get more understanding of way of life than the actual instructions of the Torah itself. This is why when the Torah tells us a story and not an instruction, the Torah spends more time and more efforts by telling us the story. Because from the story itself, we learn not less, but sometimes even more than what the instructions of the Torah themselves. And this is why it's crucial and it's important that we ourselves read stories, not because before bedtime it's good to relax by not watching TV and not watching the news, but by reading stories, but because these stories, they give us the flavor. You can have soup, but if you don't have in the soup salt, that won't be tasty. You're going to lose all of it. Now the salt is nothing. It's just 2 grams. But these 2 grams, it was make what will make the difference in the entire pot. And the same is true with the stories of the Torah and the Jewish story and Jewish history. When kids are connected, not just to the instructions of the Torah, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that, but there is rich history and there are stories around it. This is why, by the way, the Talmud, I've never checked, but maybe Victor can check for us on Wikipedia, how much of the text of the Talmud is stories. And you're going to be surprised because maybe more than half of it is stories. This rabbi did that and that rabbi did that. Why the importance of the stories? Because we learn this concept from the Torah itself. That from the stories, you learn more and it's more cherishable and it's more important than what you learn from the Torah itself. So find yourself a good storybook of Jewish value. You can take a Talmud, translate it to English. You can find many stories. And spend some time every day in learning, not just reading, but learning Torah stories and Jewish stories, because that's going to bind you, that's going to connect you with Torah and Judaism and yourself sometimes more than the actual do and don't do. Any questions? Please feel free to ask. I want to thank Dr. Chen and Dr. Sylvia for the time spending in the class, reading, and all the efforts. I'm stopping the recording.